calls, you know, I get a lot of messages, a lot of emails, um, saying I'm listening, and they also have things to share, but they don't want to share them, you know, publicly as well. But one of the things that they always say is, teach me. I want to know. I'm listening. I want to learn. So, um, you know, as Jamila and I were talking about what we're discussing, and particularly around the of race, and right now we're in a period where people are listening, and a lot of protests going on in the area of um, of race relations, right? So they're listening to people of color right now. They want to know. They want to know our history. They want to know why we feel racism and things like that. And because we have had a whitewashing of our history, right? You can't readily, you weren't taught in the public schools. Maybe at Black History Month, you may have been taught a paragraph or so on Black history. But other than that, it was either incumbent upon you to maybe learn it in your homes, or really be curious and go to libraries. So, and also in media and in marketing, we've kind of been left out of that arena, right? Our stories really haven't been told, right? And therein lies the problem. So Jamila, do you want to just take a minute to talk about your particular school? She has a very unique situation, a very unique perspective. Also a graduate of a historically Black university.
Sure, sure. Hello, everyone. As you know, I'm Marie's sister, Jamila, younger Carter, and I live in Philadelphia, and I have 3 children. I am the preschool director and co-operational director at a private school. It's called Jubilee School in Philadelphia. It's a very small private school. The school is primarily African American, and basically the mission and the focus of the school is to provide a private education that's affordable for all. And so I do a lot of thinking about that question, are you listening? You know, and especially in this time, you know, sometimes it can be really shocking to realize that a lot of people just don't know. You know, they you know, we have a lot of folks, Black folks are constantly being told we didn't know. So you have to realize that a lot of times that comes at a shock to us, because in our minds, it's been out there in the forefront, you know, on the news, the racism has been, you know, the Band-Aid's been ripped off a long time ago. It was never a secret. So that question is always kind of, it makes me wonder. But then when you put it in the context of education, it's not such a mystery, because as Marie said, history has been whitewashed, social studies, especially in public education. And when you think about that in terms of like public schools, where the children are predominantly African American, predominantly Latino, you know, you kind of wonder what that means for them. And so basically, with that whitewashing of history, it's basically telling children that their history and their legacy doesn't matter, you know, that they're not important. And studies over time have shown that when we infuse diversity into curriculum, you know, the children begin to develop a sense of self, when they can see themselves, when they can see heroes that look like them, when they can see more than just, you know, them in the context of slavery, because that's not the beginning of our history. You know, we have come from lands before that where people were kings, queens, politicians, you know, a land that's full of riches. And so the children don't see that part of history. And at Jubilee, what we do is make sure that the children know that they're members of a community and that their history is the starting point for the study of the world. You know, and it's not to say that we exclude. I think Marie had asked a good question, more or less, how do, we do have, you know, white children that attend a school, and how do those families feel about Black history being dominant in the school? And so we don't really look at it like that, because it's not Black history, it's American history. We're Americans. So it's not like we're going out of our way to teach for other, you know, white families. And quite honestly, and not to be dismissive, when you think of white people in the world, you can turn on a TV, you see images that look like you constantly, you know, that's what you see, that's your world. And sometimes when it's like that, we take that for granted. So at our school, like I said, we kind of flip that, and the focus is basically the starting point of where the children come from, the children in that community. So that's really important for us. And I am, my background is in preschool education. So I look at it from the context of our littlest learners. So when you think about that, representation matters in the literature. So we're very intentional in our school to make sure that, you know, our books are representative of all cultures, because they basically serve as a mirror for children to see themselves and a window outside into the world so that they can begin to develop an appreciation for other cultures. And once, you know, once it's not a mystery, once it's not like these people are others, you know, it's not like they're going out into the world with these preconceived biases. I mean, you'll still have them, but there's a better understanding when it's just infused into the curriculum. And, you know, when you're taught that this world is made up of people of all different races, cultures, sexual orientations, everything, family structure. So that's really important to us, and really important in, you know, making sure that we are diverse and inclusive.
So we see this, you know, I'm wondering if there's any hope of, you know, catching up, right? So we're so far behind in that arena because we've excluded our history. There's so many stories to be told, so many experiences, and when we begin to express some of these stories, especially on you know, let me tell you a story, they become as a shock to people. They're like, I didn't know. I even read one comment that said, had we been taught this history, Black history, in schools, we would be more empathetic, more compassionate, right? And my answer to that was, we're born with compassion. And you know, even the Bible says, you know, Jesus moved with compassion. If you see like a little child and the mom is crying or something, a child will rub your shoulder, mommy, are you okay? You know, that's compassion. So it's not that we need to be taught these things to have compassion, but we, you know, we should come from a place of compassion. And we should come from a place of compassion and begin to exercise that in our relationships, to begin to hear each other, you know, just, and I'm gonna go to Dr. Sandra Casey Buford to, you know, expound on that. When we talk about diversity, what that really means. Someone sent in a question, Lori sent in a question to Dr. Buford, and it was about how do we go deeper, right? How do we put some depth in diversity training in organizations, right? Instead of just surface work. So we're gonna let her talk about who she is and give us some experience and some hope.
Thank you very much, Marie. Yes, my name is Sandra Casey Buford, and I have been, it's interesting. I like to talk about what I've done because I think it's pretty amazing. You know, I am a Black woman, and I've been able to work for some amazing organizations. I've worked for Fortune 500 companies, as well as state organizations. I was the first director of diversity and inclusion at Massport, which was just a whole book full of experiences. And I am now serving as an independent consultant, and I'm still working for organizations doing DE&I work. Just recently for Harvard University and other big name organizations. And everybody wants to address diversity and inclusion. And right now, my telephone's ringing off the hook because of what's going on. People are very, very anxious to do things in their organization that are going to make them better, make their organizations better, to be welcoming to people of color. And one of the things I'm very careful of is saying that I do not do Band-Aids. I don't do Band-Aids. I encourage organizations that when they want to do diversity work, that they are thinking of more long-term sustainable work being done in their organizations. And I also talk to them about organizational DNA, which, as we know, DNA is the life of a human. It's also the life of an organization. So really doing things that are going to not just be surface or Band-Aid approaches, but they're going to be really working with depth inside organizations. So there's some best practices that I work with. And the first thing that I do is I assess an organization when I go in it. I just don't sit down and do a canned training program. I just don't do that, because there's a lot of them out there, by the way. You can get them, you can buy them. I don't do them. I actually do an assessment of an organization. My PhD is in organizational development and behavior. So I go into an organization and I really assess where they are at this current moment in terms of their understanding and in terms of their performance as far as DNA is concerned. Once I have that information, then I customize a transformational session for that organization that could run from 1 to several to 3 months to a year. And some of the best practices for diversity really start with who's leading it in the organization. And so some organizations, they don't even have anyone leading it, and that's a mistake. There needs to be a person who is qualified, who is educated to lead diversity, equity, and inclusion in the organization. And what they can do for an organization is really they bring a lens, a diversity and inclusion lens to everything that's done in the organization. That's real, true diversity. So if you're writing a policy, you're going to look at that policy and see what is the diversity aspect of that policy. How will it affect people who are diverse in the organization? How will it affect people who are coming to the organization? And that's a best practice. Something else is engagement. Organizations do not know how to engage people who are different. They know how to bring them in. I mean, actually, right now, bringing diversity into an organization is really, it's easier than ever because a lot of people are out of jobs, and a lot of people need work. But it's not just about bringing someone into an organization, it's how do you actually bring them in, include them, utilize them, and engage them. So there's processes that are involved with that. And I mean, this is a whole, I could talk forever, and I don't want to do that, but I'm just going to say that the key to not doing just Band-Aid approaches is commitment, engagement, and full integration into the DNA of an organization so that you gain sustainability and accountability.
Wonderful. Someone else, Lori, asked a second question, and I'm just going to put it out there. She just asked, in the public school setting, even if you don't have a child in the public school, how can you help the system to get more people of color, staff and teachers into the school system? And I think, you know, just piggybacking on what Sandra said, it's not enough just to get people. And I hear the question because I sit on several committees. I hear the answer a lot of time about inclusion and not having representation. And the answer is we don't have a pool of applicants. I mean, they have to, particularly on the Cape, they have to leave the Cape to go and to recruit people. And the notion is that we don't have enough. I hear it in the police force, you know, because I've been in forums that we don't have applicants. And then the question should be, why not, right? Why aren't we funneling and helping kids? I work as a mentor with the YMCA, and we mentor kids from, middle school through college. So the end game is a job, right? So we're trying to help these kids find employment, viable employment that they could make a viable living from. So we had a question from within. Jamila, did you see that question? It was from Jessica. She sent it to me. So can we unmute Jessica to see if she wanted to ask? And then I'm going to move on with the panel.
I think I can unmute myself if you can hear me.
Yes.
I just wanted to take the minute to kind of build both on what Sandra and Jamila brought up about, you know, the commitment to the change and the accountability, but also how we teach. And we're taught in schools so routinely, unless there is true diverse leadership at the top, the message is, if you work hard, you'll succeed, and there's no institutionalized bias whatsoever. And like, it's just completely ignored. And that's why we're in the position that we're in now, and why it's so hard to have these conversations with people about privilege and the way the institutions and institutionalized and systemic bias present obstacles for people. So how do we frame changing that conversation to start changing how we teach it to the kids, to start changing how we teach it in college, to start, you know, how we teach it to adults? Because, you know, as someone who's also been doing this work for a long time, I feel like we keep having the same conversations with the same stakeholders. And, you know, like Sandra, I get a lot of my phone's ringing off the hook now to do anti-bias trainings. If they want a one and done, I say, go, you know, you need to go somewhere else. That's not what I do. I'll help you fix it, but I won't help you patch it, you know? So I'd really like to hear what everybody has to say about, you know, where do we start reframing this?
Mm-hmm. Let me see. Lisa, do you want to jump in that? Can you hear me? Lisa, do you want to jump in there somewhere? This is Lisa Drennan, and she's the owner of Merge. And I also have a question for you as well.
Right. No, thank you. And just to give context of where I'm coming from, my specific expertise and background and mission is around the dimension of diversity around persons with disability. So I just seeing something different here. Everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm seeing somebody else come up on the screen. I just want to echo a few things that have been mentioned, but before, just to, again, have some clarity here, that I work with community organizations and helping them to become more inclusive in their practices around persons with diverse abilities. And when Marie asked me to be on the panel, I was considering what would the conversation be around, and how I can, share my background and experience to be helpful part of this conversation. And what I recognize all the time, and when I go into, and I will work with YMCAs or town rec programs or churches, libraries, anybody who works with the general population. And I go in very similar to some of the things that Jamila and particularly Sandra were echoing, was around the systematic change that needs to happen, and an understanding of history and background. And for the disability population, there's a long-standing the institutionalization, and that leads to why there's still segregation with let's say in schools or in work settings for persons with diverse abilities is the term that I use. And what I recognize in what I do and I teach, and the same thing about a Band-Aid, I don't want to go in and just patch up this one situation with this one particular family let's say. I want to help the whole system to change, right? And so that everybody, there's organizational change and there's commitment from all levels and there's resources given so that the way that we teach and we present information or the way that we offer our programming is inclusive so that everyone is welcomed, engaged. Again, you know, Sandra, I know you were saying engagement. Welcome, engaged, and supported to be successful. So it really does take that systematic change, and it has to be what I find. You know, for a really successful situation for me would be when I'm working with a client and we start at the top and we are making it part of their, you know, not just a program for this woman to come in and teach everybody for our workshop, that it becomes ingrained into not only their, you know, strategic plan, but also like hiring practices, you know, everything to do with HR. And then when we have employees, what's part of their job description? Is it right in there that we practice inclusive practices to ensure that all are welcome, engaged, and supported? So basically, what I want to share is most of the principles that I share and teach can be applied to any particular, right, to any dimension of diversity. So I think that was, you know, the most striking part that I wanted to make sure that I added to the conversation here. And the word empathy, and I think that that started with Jamila and then Marie chimed in on that. That is what, you know, create empathy, or really trying to get our population, our general community, to be more empathetic, and just understanding, right? No, what I want to do is create communities or help communities to create a culture where people with disabilities are just part of the community and not separate, right? Not a separate classroom or a separate program or a special program over there. That we find ways that we can see the value and the history and what somebody brings to the table. So our focus is on really focusing on their gifts that they bring to the world and helping individuals to really become part of our community and not a separate, you know, it's not a separate part. Oh, they have their own staff or their own programs that they go to. That people with disabilities should be part of everything that we offer. So there may be parts of what I just shared that could kind of spill over if we're, you know, thinking about racial equity as well. So I'm not sure if I answered your question exactly, Marie, but I'm sure I just wanted to throw that out there, how important that was to, you know, just be thinking about other elements of diversity as well from my lens.
Sure. I appreciate your lens and wanted to bring you into the conversation. But let's just go back to Jamila for a moment, because we did have this conversation earlier. And Jessica's question specifically is about how do we change the system to recognize and to go deeper, not just have the same conversations, same Band-Aids, and from a preschool level, right? I know you have something to say about that.
Yeah, and I kind of touched on that before. And on a preschool level, it just starts with, you know, introducing the children to images and stories and characters and, you know, even toys that are reflective of their background and their culture. But when I listened to you, Jessica, and you were asking, you know, it's almost like there's some sort of roadblock. You know, these conversations are happening, but they're very surface, and they're not getting to, we always seem to get to a point, but there's some resistance to change. And there has been, and we've seen this over and over again. And I think right now we're kind of undergoing an awakening, you know, because of this horrific incident that happened that was on the world stage for everyone to see. You know, in my mind, we've seen this over and over again. For a lot of people, it's just an awakening. So when I think about that, I'm going to be honest, I really can't answer your question per se from my perspective. And I'll say that because I know that on my end, and a lot of people that look like me on our end, we've been doing the work. We've been screaming, saying this needs to change. So I always go back to the individual. From the individual, we can move into organizational, then we can move into systemic. So I think it's incumbent upon the individual first to kind of do some self-reflection. What am I afraid of? What do I stand to lose if we begin to look more diverse in our schools? If we implement curriculum from culturally different backgrounds, what do I stand to lose? And I think these conversations need to happen, maybe on a smaller level, and really begin to do the deep work, because we all come into situations with biases. We come in with fears. You know, even as a teacher, a Black teacher who teaches predominantly Black children, I have, you know, there were images just from TV or whatever, and it makes me think some anti-Black thoughts sometimes, and I'm being totally honest, and I have to check myself. And so I think that, like I said, it really has to start from deep self-reflection, and then from there it needs to branch out into, you know, organizations. And then we can begin to literally, in my mind, the system needs to be dismantled and rebuilt. That's the way I see it. We need a bold reimagination of what this can look like, so all children, all people are included, you know, because it is really, it's just important. You know, our children are not seeing people that look like them, and when they do, it's not pretty. And so imagine what that does to self-esteem. And so where from my perspective in our school, it is important that these children understand their history, because when they go out into the world, they're our future leaders, you know, and they're going out with this information, and they're armed and they're empowered. And so that's what we want to see. And then another thing is I don't know, you know, there may be a lot of moms here, maybe not, but still everyone has a voice. So when you think about education and curriculum, there's a local school board. Whether you have a child or not, make your voice heard, you know, and the time for being silent is over. You can go in and you can demand, you can say, hey, listen, you know, I've noticed that there aren't many teachers of color. Or what can we do, you know, and begin to change on, you know, on an individual level.
Thank you, Jamila, and thank you, Lisa. Lisa and I have been kind of walking together for the better part of a year. I met her because I have a son, Chase, as most of you probably know, and he's now 16 years old. And it's been a 16-year struggle from getting into preschools to getting into the school play, a 16-year-old struggle, getting into camps. You know, and that's where, you know, I think the juncture where I met Lisa and finding a program, and thank God for a program like Kennedy Donovan, who has been there every step of the way to provide social and recreational programs, to provide some educational trainings, and they are a pretty diverse organization. They bring in different entertainment with all kinds of cultures, and we really appreciate that. And like Lisa said, and like Jamila said, these things take structural change to get organizations. When I can't get my child to have the assistance he needs in summer camp in an organization that I sit on the board of, that I am an influencer of, when I can't get the help that I need from the people that I serve, then there's a problem. When they can't hear me, and it's not for just Chase, but it's for everyone, right? So that we're all welcome in not only employment, but also to be able to access programs. So Yolanda, we're saving the best for last. Yolanda is a public speaker. She spoke at Driven several times. Like I said, author of 9 books. She steps away from getting her PhD. We have a ton of Black women PhDs and masters on here. This is amazing. she steps away from getting her PhD in the mental health space and in coaching. So we're really happy to have her, and we want her to speak about, her experiences and also trauma, the kinds of things that we're going through right now and how traumatic it is, not only for people of color, but for children who are, watching the world, for white people who are saying, I'm listening, but I'm afraid to speak up against these things because I don't know what to say. I don't want to present as, not knowing or insensitive. So we're all feeling trauma. We're losing sleep. We're losing weight. Not me, but we're just we're losing time. So let's have Yolanda speak to that. Hi, Molly.
Hi, Marie. Sorry I'm so late.
No worries. Love you. Hi.
Hey, everyone. Again, my name is Yolanda Lewis, and you said we were losing weight. That would be good if we were losing weight from all this stuff. We'd be skinny and fabulous and fine. But I wanted to just say hello to everyone. You might have seen on the flyer that I am the owner of a publishing company, and at the top that was introduced. So while that is true, I'm the author of 9 books, I do have my own message. And so while I'm a rock star in the publishing space, I do have my own message to share with the world, and it's connected to mental health. So you might have thought, how in the world is a publisher going to tell me about some mental health stuff? Well, that's the answer to that question. I have studied. I am a certified trauma specialist. I've been working on my PhD for a long time, writing my dissertation right now. Woohoo! Anybody can relate to that. That's a very exciting thing. So that's the perspective that I'm coming from. And one of the things I wanted to say first, I've been jumping around in my chair like a jelly bean because I'm so excited about contributing to this conversation. Oh, and let me say this too. Kudos to you, Marie, for your bravery of opening up this platform that is phenomenal to give a safe, healthy space to have dialogue and discussion, because everyone here is connected to something or someone that they can then have ideas sparked from this platform and go and create change and be the change that we all want to see in the world. So kudos to you, Marie. Thank you, Marie. And it's so nice to meet all of you. All right, now, I even took my ring off, my fancy ring, because I'm getting comfortable. It's equivalent to kicking off shoes and maybe at the end of the day, removing bra. Anybody can relate to that? You can raise your hand. It's that same feeling. I'm ready to go there. So one of the things I wanted to say with regard to change, we all know that change is not always easy because there's so many unknown elements that make people uncomfortable. And to that same point, with the same, using that same perspective in this scenario, we want to be careful not to rush the change that is needed. Because if we try to rush the change that is needed, that's when we'll get into the position of Band-Aid kind of fixes. And really, we're going to end up back where we started and back at this re-traumatizing point of seeing more things all over social media, all in our face, all in the schools, and nothing has really happened. So to avoid that, it's going to be so important for us to allow the change to pace itself. I don't believe that you need to drag the emotion, but I do believe that it needs to be paced. Trauma therapy models will teach us that calm is the way to transformation. So before anything happens, right, when you have emotion going like this all crazy, nobody's listening, right? No one can hear you. It doesn't even matter how loud you're speaking. No one can hear because everybody's emotions are like this. In trauma therapy models, no change happens, or I should say no change begins before there is calm. And when we can all be calm, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute, when we can all be calm, then we can actually start to move forward into what change should look like, that planning phase, because there's no magic solution. There's way too much to be changed that has to be taken in a bite-sized format. We pick an area, you pick a space, and we transform the mess out of that thing. All right, so what I mean by taking the time with the emotion is acknowledgement. So one of the things that we as Black Americans need to to have in our support space is not just, yeah, I'm with you, let's create change right now because it makes me uncomfortable to be having to see this all the time. And I want to get to the other side so everyone's happy. No, it's the acknowledgement that something terrible has existed for so long. And it's not necessarily about an apology. It's not necessarily about I can't think of the word right now, but it's more so about an awakening and a listening, not a fixing, right? We don't want to get in the position where we're trying to fix someone else's emotions or fix someone else's situation with some immediate solution that can't be fixed for this. It can't be applied to this. So we want to take time to listen, acknowledge, hear, like spaces like this, right? We want to take time to do that. And then what that does is provide a calm. And in that moment, it provides a calm to Black Americans, but it should also maybe even provide a calm to other cultures as well, because it will force you, just as Jamila had mentioned earlier, about getting into the space of, wow, that kind of made me uncomfortable. I want to button up my shirt. I want to put my bra back on, right? And in that space, you then can evaluate, why those feelings make you uncomfortable. What about those feelings make you uncomfortable? What about those feelings make you want to say, I don't want to hear it? Is it because it's true? Is it because you feel guilty? Is it because you feel helpless, right? You want to deal with that and even share it back. Like, wow, I acknowledge that you feel this way. I acknowledge your trauma. And in that, you know what? I feel X, Y, Z. It opens up the dialogue and allows there to be trust and build relationship from there. Not immediate. I'm not talking immediate microwave stuff. And I think in our culture, we get so used to being able to see and produce results quickly that we look to apply that same model in all things, and it doesn't happen that way. Let me explain this too with regard to trauma. Trauma is any heightened constant state of emotion. Any heightened constant state of emotion, that is trauma. So a lot of times people think, oh, I wasn't molested, I wasn't raped, I wasn't this or that, and so trauma doesn't apply to me. No, in the time that we're in, we're all facing trauma right now, all of us. And trying to work through that trauma to rush or resolve is not going to heal the trauma. It's not going to do that. So I wanted to mention that and then go back to your question, because I've been, just like I said, sitting like a jelly bean waiting to jump in. And I wanted to make that point of, I don't believe that it's safe for us to rush the healing part of getting through this trauma to the end solution. We've got to get to a calm. And you, Marie, are definitely a part of and contributing to that part of the process. So again, I thank you for that. All right, so that being said, what was the second part of the question?
I think that was the question pretty much. It was just about, all of us facing trauma. So I want to just move, and then I'm going to come back to you.
Sure.
I think all of our panelists had a moment to speak, and I'm hoping that you guys have been getting something out of this and would like to share something or ask a question to something that you heard, because I think we have about less than 20 minutes left, and have your voices be heard. If there was something you saw on the Let's Tell Me a Story page. Before I do that, I just want to go to Lisa, because someone sent in a question, and I want to honor that because I asked for questions. And she asked, how do you think, I don't know if you can answer that, how do you think the public schools can include students with fine motor disabilities in outdoor experiences beyond the typical gym and recess? Do you think this would be a different answer for children of different racial backgrounds? Unmute yourself, Lisa.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
It shouldn't be affected by different racial backgrounds, but if that's the case, with with questions like these, I always, kind of preface it with that it's individualized, obviously, but how do our public schools embrace that opportunity? I would say, that many public schools have an inclusive mindset, right? So we take the Henderson School in Boston. The entire school, from a bus driver, somebody who works in the cafeteria, to all the specialists, phys ed, art, whatnot, everybody is trained on inclusion principles. So that's kind of like the mecca of schools for inclusion. So not all are on that same page, and a lot still practice, they have specialized programming. So what I want to share is that I think anything's possible. And we have to kind of start there, that we should, and what inclusion is about is getting to yes, right? It's something, that's one of my principles of inclusion, is that we take any particular situation and our focus should not be like, well, it can't happen because of this reason, or this might happen, or you know what, maybe it would be helpful. Can everybody who's on mute themselves who's not speaking? Because I'm just hearing a lot of feedback. So I don't know if that would be helpful for others. Just to mute yourself if you're not speaking. That would be helpful. Thank you. So anyways, back to getting to yes, right? So if we take that approach and looking at if a child wants to participate more in outdoor activities, or kind of, phys ed, outdoor, outside of PT perhaps, we just work together with everybody on the team to figure out the best way to make that happen. So I don't have a specific answer to that, but I think if a school is practicing inclusive practices, they find a way to make that happen. And it's part of one of the principles of inclusion. So hopefully that's helpful. And for that person who asked, I'd be happy to jump on a call afterwards, or just shoot me an email. I'll throw my email in the chat box, and you can reach out to me and we can talk further about that. Was that helpful, Marie?
You're muted, Marie. You got to unmute yourself.
I just said a whole bunch and nobody heard it. But I was just saying, one of our participants on the line had a question. Jamie Carter, she's on the line, and an observation. She said, I'd like to see more POC, people of color. It's kind of a cool term to me. I don't know. Now we're POCs, right? People of color run for school committee and more representation. So that was a comment that she made on the line. I think Jamila touched on that too, for us to get involved, for us to run for office. We'd like to have jobs at the top too. I don't know how many organizations that I've been a part of that when it came time for the promotion, that I was told, wait for this. You may get married and have children. So, we're not going to give you the assistant director's job. The person who told me that ended up having twins shortly after that and had to leave her position as the regional director. But so the things, that matter to us, like I said, I was talking about our YMCA achievers, and the goal is employment, right? The goal isn't just a good education, but a goal is a good job, a good position in an organization. People of color, people with disabilities, we deserve and want jobs at the top too. All things being equal, if we are qualified, if we are, have the proper education and the credentials, that should be the goal in anything. So Jamila, are there any questions in the chats for anybody, or does anyone have any questions? Somebody wants to unmute themselves. I would love to hear from Karen McPherson. No? Okay. So she said no. She was in education years ago and has a few wonderful stories on, let me tell you a story. So Karen McPherson. Doctor, I keep calling you doctor, but I'm just going to call you Sandra because I know that's probably what you want to be called. Sandra, I just wanted to get back to you. Am I on your screen? And I just wanted to get back to you in terms of diversity. And can you define what diversity means? I think in our minds, we all have this idea of diversity meaning there's more than one person in a room in an organization that looks like me, more than 2 people in my neighborhood that looks like me. Oh, it's diverse. And you know, it's more, I know it's much more than that.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because when I talk about diversity, I'm talking about a whole range of differences. And I even use a schematic. It's basically a diversity wheel that has expanded over the years. We don't even know who really is the author of it because it's so big. And what it does is it just includes everything, including the way people learn, the way people look, you know, geographically where they're from. So diversity is many, many dimensions of difference that exist in an organization. Now, that having been said, there's also, within those diversity and inclusion dimensions, there are specific groups of people that have been marginalized historically. So those are that's where the equity comes in. So now, I don't know whether you knew it or not, but we are now calling ourselves diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because it's understood that there are, within all those dimensions that are on that wheel, there are specific categories of diversity that have just been historically marginalized, and that have just been historically the target of inequity. And that would be typically women, minorities, and Blacks in particular. So basically, we're talking about the people, we're talking about the numbers. And now when we talk about inclusion, we're talking about how much or how well, how expansively, how inclusively those individuals that are brought in who are different, how are they being used within an organization? How are they being used within an organizational scheme, whether it's from top to bottom, from sideways? How are they being used? How are they being integrated into the organization? Sorry about that. That's inclusion. So there you have it. So there's diversity, there's equity, how fairly people who are different are treated, and some of that is based on historical data as well. And then also just the whole idea of how they are being used and how they're being engaged and utilized within the organization.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, this has been a wonderful forum, and I think the more we listen, the more we learn, the more questions we ask, the more we learn. And the more we learn, the more we know, and the better we can do. You know, the better we can do, continue to have conversations with one another, continue to bring these conversations back to your families, to your workplaces, continue to tell your stories and to write about it, you know. So we have a long way to go, and I like what Yolanda said about nothing should be done quickly, because we want lasting change. And Yolanda, maybe you can talk about a little bit of self-care during this time, and how as we're getting quiet, how can we protect ourselves? How can we take care of ourselves, our mental health? I know for me, I have a lot of platforms on social media, and when I'm scrolling and checking in and seeing things come at me, I mean, by evening, my emotions are so shattered that it's hard to sleep. When I see people who are saying things like all lives matter, when as the answer, not just exclusively to Black Lives Matter, when they're not really hearing the message or understanding the message, when they're when people are saying things don't exist that do exist, right? When people are negating others' feelings, my experiences, it really is more trauma. It's more, you know, I'm an emotional eater, so I've been on a weight loss plan for over 3 weeks. But when things, you know, particularly around dinner time, it's like when I'm hearing things or seeing things, the news come on, the first thing is what can I put in my mouth? And it's not good. It's not good for me, my stress level. I read somewhere that Black women hold weight in their hips and in their bellies. You know, we're sometimes bigger and stuff. And it's stress, the stress that comes on our bodies. You know, it's not like I'm sitting home eating all day. It's just not happening. But the way my body, and you know, we're prone to things like high blood pressure at an earlier age and other things. You know, we have beautiful skin, but we're aging, you know, at a faster rate due to some stress.
I agree. And it's important to make sure to take care of yourself, right? Simply put, you have to take care of yourself, which means you have to be honest. You have to be honest with where you're at, because re-traumatizing the pain is only going to fester what's already there even more, or resurface what's there and just highlight it and magnify it in ways that turn toxic. And that's what we don't want. That's what will be sure to bring us away from change. Now, we cannot change what's happening already, and the people that are fighting for the cause and what they are fighting and doing so. We can't change that. We also can't change how much the media and news pumps that into our timeline and pumps that into our TVs and pumps that into our lives. But what we can do is manage us. We can manage us. So my first recommendation would be to be honest with yourself, to know that you need space. It doesn't make you less of a supporter if you need space. It doesn't make you less of anything. It doesn't make you less of anything to feel to be and feel in a space of overwhelm. It doesn't make you less powerful as a woman, as a person. It doesn't make you less of a boss. It doesn't make you less of any of those things to say, you know what? I need a break. I need space. And in that space, do something you like. Do something that makes you have life and gives you energy. Maybe it's just going for a walk. Because sometimes what happens when we give ourselves that space, now our brain is free, and we can then think of ways we can actually contribute to the conversation when we jump back in the game. Mm-hmm. But if you never take that time to pause and say, it's too much, I've had to do it myself, right? I'm the mother of 2 Black young sons. I fear we haven't gone to any protests, not because I don't believe in the cause, because I'm scared to death that someone would mistake them as something else. One of my sons, he is special needs, autistic, and so he's big. He's my Black child. I mean, all my children are Black, but he's Black, and he has autism. So he does things that are not quote unquote normal. And all the worst thing that I think of is a cop or even anybody mistaking that as something that it's not. And now I got to go off and catch a case. No, I'm kidding. But I have to be defensive and, just go into this other space. I don't want that. So we're home. They don't go too much of anywhere that we don't already know, because it's traumatic to think of what might happen. Husband the same, my father the same, my brother the same. That's re-traumatizing then when I see Black men shot on TV. Live broadcast, broad daylight, or even nighttime, that's traumatic. So I have to even step away myself just to process, just to bring my emotion down, right? I'm not telling you guys to do anything that I don't practice my own self. When we're getting to that calm space so that transformation can happen, that's for me too, on a very micro level, so I can function as a wife and a mother and a human being in our society today. They don't have to be scared to go to the grocery store. They don't have to be scared. My son, we live in a nice neighborhood in a nice part of Georgia. He was walking home from school one day. He's not allowed to walk home from school anymore. He's 17, 6'4", not allowed to walk home from school anymore because he was stopped by a cop that was just trying to harass him. My son's a good kid. He's a superstar in basketball, all that good stuff. The school knows him well, but he got stopped. And thank God nothing after that happened. But now I've got to put restrictions around him so that he can be safe. So my point is, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent. Got a little passion right there.
Yeah, that's what we want.
But my point is, you wanna make sure to know when your limits. You got to be honest with yourself to say, you know what? I need a break. I need a break. I need some space to digest what's just happened so I can figure out how to move forward. Because as mothers, anybody else a mother on here or parent on here? Yeah, so your children are watching how you respond. They're watching how you respond. And if they are what's going to carry the change that we invoke, you've got to make sure that you are careful and methodical in how you respond. So I'm very honest to say, I am pissed off. I can't even believe this happened. I might go off on a little tangent sometimes so that they can know that emotion is real. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. We want the candid, the conversations that matter. That matter. We're going to think about that because some people don't have to think about that.
Right.
So women on this line and men, Ralph was on here, they're going to think about that. These are things that we think about that they don't have to think about. I think about Chase. He's cute now, but he's going to get a beard one day. He's not going to be so cute to you guys. He's not going to be cute little Chase maybe. I don't know. So anyway, I want to take these last minute and thank our sponsors. My sister, Julianne Dillon, we call each other sisters. She's on here. You see her up here? Do you want to say anything? Unmute yourself. Wait a minute, unmute. Okay.
There we go. I just want to say thank you so much to everyone. It's good to have people that have been very involved in their specialties, kind of share their expertise with us, because it really does help everyone to get the heart of compassion, get the mentality to know how to get an outcome. And that's me, my heart and the outcome, and I'm good to go. So on behalf of everyone from Kennedy Donovan Center, I just want to again say thank you. And Marie, thank you so much. You are my sister. I love you. And just good to see everyone.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I really, like I said, appreciate Kennedy Donovan and all they do. And Julian in particular, we work well closely together on driven retreats and everything else in between. I love when people can recognize the talents and the gifts with you and equally share, right? And get together. To me, that's inclusion, that's diversity, to connect and share and produce. She's all about outcomes. To produce, she's going to ask me how many people on there, you know, and thank God Zoom keeps those tracks. But we're looking for outcomes, right, Katie? We're looking for outcomes in this whole process. It's going to take a while, maybe a lifetime or two, right? Because we've been fighting some of these good fights for years for inclusion with people with disabilities, for sexual orientation, for race. We've been fighting these good fights for many, many years, but it's going to start, like Jamila said, from an individual basis. It's sometimes going to start by destroying the structures and rebuilding them one person at a time. Jamie, we are so happy to have you on here. She's down here, Jamie Carter, and she's a prolific writer and speaker. We did stand up once and she blew me away. But I'm just glad to have you all. Katie Paul, I'm so glad. She is the director of an organization called Cape Cod Can, and they do bunches of really creative things with people with diverse abilities, like out of the box shows and stand up, and Chase and I go as much as we can. And Molly Spry, I want to just acknowledge you. We work together with the YMCA Youth Achievers, like I said, we mentor kids. And I think there's a lot of work, Molly, that we need to take a look at, right? We work with kids of color, 99%, and we need to give them a sense of self, because what we don't want to do is turn kids out into colleges and into the workplace not having a wonderful sense of self and not being able to survive the workplace, right? That's important to me, Molly. And that's...
And to Yolanda's point, I think making sure now with all the challenges that the kids have to come to that place of calm, it's a big piece to pay attention to.
Okay, so with that, we are going to wrap it up. And hi, Gretchen. She's saying hi to everyone. Hi, Gretchen. You're so pleasant looking. You've been on there. And who else is pleasant looking? I've been looking at you, Grazel's iPhone. Just pleasant to look at. And again, Andrea and Susan. So we had 21 people on here. That's a good start, don't you think? So let's give ourselves a hand. And I want to acknowledge our speakers and thank them from the bottom of my heart. I called them all, and then immediately it was yes. Yes to Yolanda, yes to Jamila, yes to Sandra, and yes to my friend Lisa. And I'm so proud of you guys. And I just look forward to working with you some more. And if anybody is looking for contact information from any of those people, please let me know. One more second. Jamila, I'm going to give you 1 second to tell folks we're going to share some information about your beautiful school, Jubilee. Or I can't unmute. You don't want to?
Yeah, I just unmuted. I just unmuted myself.
Okay.
I'm not prepared to share, you
Okay.
know, the link and all of
Okay.
that stuff. So,
Okay.
you know, I asked to collect email addresses for you, Marie.
Okay.
I don't know if you had that, but, you know, we can share that way.
Okay. The most beautiful school I've ever seen, the confidence in these children. We sat in on a poetry reading. They were like little teeny preschoolers on up to 5th and 6th grade. I thought I was listening to some, you know, prolific writers from somewhere. But anyway, I thank you all, including our sponsors, Kate Kennedy Donovan, for coming on here. We'd love to have you back in 2 weeks, and we're going to change the topic and change things up, and we're going to do this. We're going to grow this audience. I have a room for 100 people, so invite your friends, and we're going to keep the dialogue going, because when we stop, that's when we fail, right? We have to come to a place of calm, like Yolanda said, and then connect with each other and share. So we can cause the change. We can teach people that they would go out and emulate what we're trying to achieve here. So thank you all. Okay.
Thanks, Marie.
You're welcome.
Great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good job, Marie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, Marie.
Bye. Bye.
You did a beautiful job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
You look like me, Yolanda.
We
We
all
look like twins.
We all kind of look
You,
alike.
you do look like twins.
That was good, huh, guys?
Yeah, it looks like one other person is still on. I
That's
don't know.
cousin. That's Ralph's auntie, my friend.
Got it. Okay. And then you're still recording.
Okay. So.